The morning sun cast long shadows across the parking lot of St. Andrew's Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Claire Mitchell sat in her rented Toyota Camry, watching wedding guests stream through the oak doors, their laughter carrying on the humid September air. She gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white, her heart pounding against her ribs. "You're not on the list," the usher had said 15 minutes earlier, his teenage face flushed with awkward authority. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you in without an invitation." Claire had tried to explain. She was the bride's sister, for God's sake. But the boy had merely shrugged and pointed to his clipboard. No invitation, no entry. The rules were clear. Now, from her car, she watched her cousins embrace on the church steps, saw her Aunt Martha adjusting her hat against the breeze. They all walked past her car without a glance, as if she were invisible. Perhaps she had been for the past 7 years. Her phone buzzed. A text from her business partner, David. "Meeting confirmed for Monday. The Johnson account is ours. You did it, Claire." She stared at the message, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. CEO of her own consulting firm at 32, named one of Charleston's 40 under 40 business leaders just last month. And yet here she was, banned from her own sister's wedding like some common crasher. The church bells began to ring, their bronze voices echoing across the historical district. Claire knew she should leave, drive back to her apartment, pour herself a glass of wine, and pretend this day meant nothing. But something kept her frozen in place, watching through the windshield as the last guests hurried inside. 7 years. 7 years since she'd refused to join the family real estate business, since she'd told her father she wanted to build something of her own. 7 years since he'd called her ungrateful, selfish, a disappointment to the Mitchell name. "You walk out that door," he'd said that night, his face purple with rage, "and you're no daughter of mine." She'd walked anyway. The church doors closed with a final definitive thud. Inside, her baby sister Emma would be adjusting her veil, checking her makeup one last time. Their mother would be crying happy tears. Their father would be practicing his smile for the photographers, and Claire would be exactly where they'd placed her, outside, looking in. She reached for the ignition key, then stopped. Through the stained glass windows, she could see movement, shadows gathering for the ceremony. Her sister was getting married, and she wouldn't even see it happen. Claire closed her eyes, remembering Emma at 5 years old, crawling into her bed during thunderstorms. "You'll protect me, won't you, Claire?" she'd whisper. "You'll always be here." Always, Claire had promised. But promises, she'd learned, were luxuries that black sheep couldn't afford. Chapter 2. The Intervention. Inside St. Andrew's Church, Richard Hawthorne adjusted his silk tie and tried to ignore the knot of unease in his stomach. As father of the groom, he should have been focused on his son Michael's happiness, on the beautiful ceremony about to unfold. Instead, he found himself scanning the congregation, searching for a face he knew wouldn't be there. "Something wrong, honey?" his wife Patricia whispered, touching his arm. Richard shook his head, but the feeling persisted. He'd built a career on reading situations, on understanding the unspoken dynamics in a room. 25 years as a federal judge had taught him to recognize injustice when he saw it, even when it came wrapped in white satin and wedding flowers. The organist began the processional. Richard watched Emma Mitchell glide down the aisle on her father's arm, radiant in her grandmother's vintage dress. Robert Mitchell wore the satisfied expression of a man who'd orchestrated everything exactly to his specifications. His wife Linda followed, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. But where was Claire? Richard had met her only once, 3 months ago, at a charity gala for the Charleston Legal Aid Society. She'd been there representing her company, which had donated a substantial sum. They'd talked for 20 minutes about business ethics, about building something meaningful in a world that often rewarded shortcuts. She'd impressed him, sharp, principled, with a quiet strength that reminded him of his late mother. "She's brilliant," Michael had said later that night. "Emma's always talking about how proud she is of Claire," but he'd trailed off, uncomfortable. "But what?" Richard had pressed. "The family doesn't really include her. It's complicated." Now, watching the wedding party assemble at the altar, Richard understood exactly how uncomplicated it was. This was about control, about punishing someone for choosing their own path. The minister began speaking about love, about unity, about families joining together. Richard's jaw tightened. What kind of unity excluded a sister? What kind of love demanded such a price? He thought of his own daughter, Sarah, sitting 2 rows back with her wife and their adopted son. There had been a time when Richard's own father had threatened to disown Sarah for embarrassing the family. Richard had stood up to him then, and he'd never regretted it. The minister's voice droned on. "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, This was the moment for dramatic objections in movies, but real life didn't work that way. Richard shifted in his seat, catching Michael's eye. His son looked happy, nervous, hopeful, all the things a groom should be. But there was something else there too, a flicker of sadness when he glanced at the empty space where Claire should have been standing as a bridesmaid. Do you, Emma Louise Mitchell, take this man? Richard made his decision. He couldn't let this happen. Not the marriage. Michael and Emma loved each other deeply, but this erasure, this cruel editing of a family's story to remove an inconvenient chapter. He'd seen too much injustice in his courtroom to let it flourish in his own family. As Emma began her vows, Richard quietly stood. Patricia grabbed his hand, alarmed, but he squeezed it gently and walked to the aisle. Every head in the church turned. The minister paused mid-sentence. Your Honor? Robert Mitchell's voice was sharp with confusion and barely contained anger. Is there a problem? Richard faced the congregation, his courtroom presence filling the space. Before we continue, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the church, I need to say something. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Emma's face had gone pale beneath her veil. A wedding, Richard continued, is about joining families, about celebrating love in all its forms. But how can we celebrate when someone is missing? How can we talk about unity when we've excluded someone who should be here? He turned to Emma, his voice gentling. Your sister Claire is sitting outside in her car because she wasn't invited to watch you get married. Whatever happened in the past, whatever wounds exist between your family and her, is this really how you want to begin your marriage? With your sister banished to the parking lot? The church fell silent. Emma's bouquet trembled in her hands. This celebration, Richard said, addressing the room but looking directly at Robert Mitchell, can only be complete if all the pillars of this family are present, and that includes Claire. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. The silence in St. Andrew's Church was deafening. 300 guests held their collective breath as Emma Mitchell stood frozen at the altar, her wedding veil trembling with each shallow breath. Mascara traced delicate lines down her cheeks. How dare you! Robert Mitchell's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. He stepped forward, his face flushed with fury. This is my daughter's wedding. You have no right— Dad, stop! Emma's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of years. She turned to face her father, lifting her veil with shaking hands. He's right. Linda Mitchell gasped from the front pew. Emma, honey, we discussed this. Claire made her choice. No, Mom, you made it for her. Emma's voice grew stronger. She looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly, then back at her parents. I've been a coward. We all have. She turned to Richard Hawthorne, who still stood in the aisle like a guardian of justice. She's outside? Really? In the parking lot, Richard confirmed. She tried to come in, but she wasn't on the list. Emma laughed, a broken, bitter sound that seemed to surprise even her. The list, of course. She gathered her skirts in one hand. I need to— Emma Louise Mitchell. Robert's voice had dropped to a dangerous whisper. If you walk out of this church, you'll what, Dad? Disown me too? Emma's eyes blazed. Cut me off like you did Claire? Pretend I don't exist? The congregation shifted uncomfortably. Someone's phone buzzed and was quickly silenced. That's enough. Michael stepped forward, placing a protective hand on Emma's back. Mr. Mitchell, with all due respect, Claire is Emma's sister. My sister-in-law. If Emma wants her here, she should be here. You don't understand, Robert sputtered. That girl, Richard Hawthorne interrupted, his judge's voice cutting through Robert's bluster, is one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in Charleston. She's built a company that employs 40 people. She serves on 3 nonprofit boards. Last month, her firm's pro bono work helped save a homeless shelter from closing. He paused, letting the words sink in. I know this because I bothered to find out who Claire Mitchell really is, instead of who you've decided she should be. Emma stared at Richard, fresh tears spilling. The Riverside shelter? That was Claire? Among other things. Richard's expression softened. Your sister has spent 7 years becoming someone remarkable. The only tragedy here is that you've missed it. We gave her everything, Linda Mitchell protested weakly. The best schools, every opportunity, everything except the freedom to be herself, Emma said quietly. She turned to the minister, who looked like he wished the floor would swallow him whole. I'm sorry, Pastor Williams. Could we have a few minutes? Without waiting for an answer, Emma began walking down the aisle, her train sweeping behind her like a river of white silk. The guests parted before her, whispers rising like smoke. Emma! Robert's voice boomed. I forbid— Robert! Patricia Hawthorne stood from her seat, her voice calm but firm. That's enough. Your daughter is trying to do the right thing. Let her. Emma paused at the church doors. looking back at the chaos she was leaving in her wake. Her mother's face was a mask of shock, her father's purple with rage. But Michael was smiling at her, that crooked smile that had made her fall in love with him 3 years ago, and Richard Hawthorne nodded once approvingly. "Go," Michael said. "Bring her back. We'll wait." Emma pushed through the heavy oak doors into the blazing afternoon sun. The parking lot stretched before her, and there, in a silver Camry near the back, she saw a familiar silhouette. Claire had seen her coming. She sat frozen behind the wheel, watching her baby sister approach in full wedding regalia, looking like something out of a movie. When Emma reached the car, they stared at each other through the window for a long moment. Then Claire rolled it down. "Nice dress," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Emma laughed and sobbed at the same time. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. No. Please let me say this." Emma gripped the window frame, heedless of her manicured nails. "I was a coward. When Dad cut you off, I should have stood up to him. I should have fought for you. But I was 19 and scared, and I let them convince me you were wrong, that you were selfish for not joining the family business, that you were breaking Dad's heart on purpose." Claire's composure finally cracked. "I just wanted to build something of my own, Em. That's all. I know, God, I know that now." Emma wiped at her face, probably destroying her makeup artist's hard work. "I've missed you so much, every day. When I got promoted at the museum, when Michael proposed, when I tried on wedding dresses, you should have been there for all of it." "You work at a museum now?" Claire's voice was soft with wonder. "Mom always said that was a waste of your art history degree." "Assistant curator at the Charleston Museum. Turns out I'm pretty good at it." Emma smiled through her tears. "Turns out we're both pretty good at following our own paths." They looked at each other, 7 years of silence hanging between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. "I can't go in there," Claire said finally. Dad can deal with it or leave," Emma said fiercely. "This is my wedding, and I want my sister there." She reached through the window to grasp Claire's hand. "Please, I know I don't deserve it, but please, stand with me. Be my sister again." Claire stared at their intertwined hands, Emma's with its fresh manicure and enormous engagement ring, her own bearing the small scars of building a business from nothing. "What about Mom? She'll come around, or she won't. But I'm done letting their pride cost me my sister." Claire's voice broke. "Also," Emma added with a watery smile, "Michael's dad just basically shut down the entire ceremony to defend you. I think he might actually arrest Dad if he causes any more trouble. He's a federal judge." "He did what?" "It was incredible. You should have seen Dad's face." Emma squeezed her hand. "Please, Claire, come inside. Let me fix this. Let us be sisters again." Claire looked at the church, then back at Emma. Slowly, she turned off the engine and opened the car door. Chapter 4. The Resolution. The walk back to the church felt both endless and too short. Claire's simple navy dress, she'd worn it hoping to blend in if she somehow got inside, felt woefully inadequate next to Emma's elaborate gown. But Emma kept her hand firmly clasped in Claire's, as if afraid she might bolt. "I should warn you," Emma said as they approached the doors. "It's a bit chaotic in there. Did the judge really stop the ceremony? Right in the middle of my vows. I've never seen Dad that speechless." Emma paused at the threshold. "Are you ready for this?" Claire squeezed her sister's hand. "Are you?" Together, they pushed open the doors. The church had erupted into pockets of heated discussion. Some guests were standing, others whispering furiously. Robert Mitchell was near the altar, engaged in what looked like a tense conversation with Richard Hawthorne. Michael stood between them, clearly trying to mediate, but when the doors opened, every conversation stopped. 300 pairs of eyes turned to watch Emma lead Claire down the aisle. The whispers started immediately. "Is that her? The sister? I thought she was..." Claire kept her eyes forward, focusing on the altar, on the flowers, on anything but the faces of relatives who hadn't spoken to her in 7 years. She saw Aunt Martha's shocked expression, Uncle Ted's disapproving frown. Her cousin Jessica actually took out her phone to snap a picture. "Put that away," Emma hissed at Jessica as they passed. When they reached the altar, Richard Hawthorne stepped aside with a small nod of approval. Michael beamed at them both, but Robert and Linda Mitchell stood like twin statues of disapproval, their faces carved from stone. "Claire," Linda whispered, and for a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. "You came." "Emma asked me to," Claire replied simply. "This is highly inappropriate," Robert began, but Emma cut him off. "No, Dad. What's inappropriate is excluding Claire because she wouldn't be your puppet." Emma's voice carried to every corner of the church. "What's inappropriate is 7 years of pretending she doesn't exist because she dared to want something different." She rejected this family. I rejected your control, Claire said quietly, speaking directly to her father for the first time in 7 years. There's a difference. Robert's face darkened. You ungrateful, Mr. Mitchell. Richard Hawthorne's voice held the authority of countless courtroom proceedings. I suggest you think very carefully about your next words. Your daughter is getting married. Both your daughters are here. This should be a moment of joy, not continued conflict. Who the hell do you think you are? Robert snarled. I'm the man whose son is marrying your daughter, which makes us family. Richard's smile was sharp as a blade. And in my family, we don't disown children for having dreams of their own. The standoff stretched taut as a wire. Claire could feel the entire congregation holding its breath. This was it, the moment that would define everything that came after. Then a small voice spoke from the front pew. Grandpa, why are you so mad at Aunt Claire? Everyone turned. A little boy, maybe 6 years old, stood on the pew in a miniature tuxedo. Claire recognized him as her cousin Maria's son, a child born after her exile, who knew her only as a name never spoken. Robert's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. That's an excellent question, Tommy, Richard Hawthorne said gently. Perhaps your grandfather would like to answer it. She left, Robert said weakly. People leave sometimes, Tommy said with the devastating logic of children. Mommy says that's okay. She says families are supposed to love each other anyway. In the silence that followed, Claire heard her mother make a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob. Out of the mouths of babes, someone murmured. Emma seized the moment. Pastor Williams, I'd like to make a small change to the ceremony. She turned to Claire. I know it's last minute, and you're not dressed for it, and I have absolutely no right to ask, but will you be my maid of honor? Claire's eyes widened. Please, I should have asked you from the beginning. You should have been part of all of this. The planning, the dress fittings, the bachelorette party I know you would have hated. Emma's smile was watery, but real. I can't change the past 7 years, but I can change today. Claire looked at her sister, really looked at her. Emma wasn't the 19-year-old girl she'd left behind. There were tiny lines around her eyes, a new determination in the set of her jaw. She'd grown up, found her own strength, and she was using it now, in front of everyone, to bridge the gap their father had created. Okay, Claire whispered. Okay? Emma's face lit up. Someone's going to have to tell me where to stand. Though, I've never been a maid of honor before. Emma let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and threw her arms around Claire. The congregation burst into a mix of applause and continued whispers. This is ridiculous, Robert muttered, but the fight had gone out of him. Linda touched his arm, and for the first time in 7 years, she looked directly at Claire. You look well, she said softly. Successful. I am, Claire replied, meeting her mother's gaze steadily. Linda nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. Good. That's good. Pastor Williams cleared his throat. Well then, shall we begin again? Properly this time? As Claire took her place beside Emma, she caught Richard Hawthorne's eye. Thank you, she mouthed. He winked. Welcome to the family. The ceremony resumed, but everything had changed. When Pastor Williams spoke about love and family, the words carried new weight. When Michael and Emma exchanged vows, Claire heard not just promises between two people, but a commitment to do better, to be better. Do you, Michael Richard Hawthorne, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do, Michael said, his voice strong and clear. Do you, Emma Louise Mitchell, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Emma looked at Michael, then at Claire, then back at Michael. I absolutely do. The church erupted in genuine applause this time. As Michael and Emma kissed, Claire felt 7 years of hurt begin to ease. It wasn't healed. That would take time, conversations, probably some therapy, but it was a start. During the recessional, Emma insisted Claire walk with her and Michael. As they made their way down the aisle, Claire saw faces she'd thought she'd never see again. Some were welcoming, others wary. Her father stood stiffly beside her mother, not quite meeting anyone's eyes. Outside, in the September sunshine, Emma grabbed Claire's hands. You'll come to the reception? Please? I know this has been overwhelming, but I'll come, Claire assured her. Though I might need to borrow some makeup. I think I cried mine off. I have a whole emergency kit in the bridal suite. Emma grinned. We can fix our faces together, like we used to before school dances. I remember, Claire said softly. As the photographer began organizing formal pictures, Richard Hawthorne approached. Miss Mitchell, I hope I didn't overstep. You gave me my sister back, Claire interrupted. I don't think there are words for how grateful I am. I gave you both the opportunity, he corrected. You and Emma did the hard work. He paused. Michael tells me you run a consulting firm. We should talk. I know several businesses that could use your expertise. Before Claire could respond, Emma's voice rang out. Claire, come on. We need you in the family photos. Family photos. The words hit her like a physical force. Go on, Richard said gently. Your family's waiting. As Claire walked toward the group assembling on the church steps, she saw her mother whisper something to her father. He nodded stiffly, then cleared his throat. Claire, he said. Nothing more, but it was the first time he'd said her name in 7 years. Dad, she replied evenly. They stood there, the gulf of 7 years between them. Maybe it would never fully close. Maybe some wounds cut too deep. But as Emma pulled her into the group, as Michael's family welcomed her with warm smiles, as the photographer called out positioning instructions, Claire realized something. Sometimes the families we choose are just as important as the ones we're born into. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, they become one and the same. Everyone smile, the photographer called. This is a happy day. And despite everything, or perhaps because of it, Claire found that she meant it when she smiled. It was a happy day. A complicated, messy, painful, beautiful day. The kind of day that changed everything. The kind of day when exile ended and something new began. As the camera clicked, capturing this imperfect, precious moment, Claire felt Emma's hand find hers again. This time, she knew neither of them would let go.